Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and as usual, we got another good one for you today. Today, we got someone that I've actually been following on YouTube for quite a while. Saw him in person and was like, man, I probably shouldn't introduce myself. In retrospect, I definitely should have. Either way, super nice guy. Today, we have James Visser on the podcast for you. He is with Bow Disciples, if you're familiar with them. Just a fun guy. He does great content. It's all about learning, which obviously I'm not necessarily interested in. I want to have a little bit of fun, and his content is a lot of fun. So I want to thank James, of course, for coming on the podcast. If you guys haven't checked out Bow Disciples, please do. Links to everything you need to know are in the show notes. But beyond that, guys, thank you for tuning in. Let's just go ahead and kick this thing off. I don't want to beat around the bush anymore. Let's let James tell you some of his stories. Thank you. All right, James. Welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast, brother. How are you?
Great, man. Appreciate you having me on. Been excited to do this since you reached out a little while ago.
Yeah, man. I've been thinking about getting you on here ever since I thought I saw you at the San Antonio TAC, and I do believe it was you. I just, I don't know. I got the jitters. I'm like, I'm going to let him do his thing. I'm just going to let him do his thing. So thank you for coming on, man. It's exciting to meet you, and I'm excited to hear some stories from you today.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. So again, thanks for having me. I saw you got Uncle Ted on recently. That's pretty cool. Congrats on that.
Thanks, man.
Blowing up.
Ted, he's a character, man. He's you gotta let Ted just do what Ted does. I was like, let's talk about stories, and he's like, let's talk about politics. And so it was a roller coaster of emotions for that episode, but it was a lot of fun.
Cool.
But yeah, hey, why don't we kick this thing off right? Why don't we let you introduce yourself to the folks so they know who they're hearing some stories from today?
Yeah, so my name is James Visser, and like Michael was saying, I've done YouTube for about 5 years now. I've been a bow hunter my whole life, pretty much. Shot my first rabbit with a bow when I was 5 years old, and been doing it ever since. I think I got my first deer not too much later, so been doing it a long time, and it's definitely something I'm passionate about, and it's just what I was raised doing, especially archery. Like I had a bow in my hand that I would always play around with when I was like 2 or 3, and I just have always done it. So started making, I always have made videos, but I made biking videos, then real estate videos. Now I was like, it just makes sense to film what I've always done too. So we started doing the hunting and archery videos in 2018, and nobody watched for a long time. And then all of a sudden, now we have a pretty big audience in the space. So it's pretty cool, but
that's cool,
that's
man.
about it.
Man, I have a 4-year-old, and I got a bow in his hands, but he struggles to hit like a 4 foot by 8 foot block of hay. So I don't know how you hit a rabbit at 5, man. That's pretty special.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah, cool, man. Well, yeah. So Bow Disciples, like I said, I've been watching your stuff for a while, and that's why I recognize you in San Antonio. It's not the normal, like, hey, just check this out. You guys have a lot of fun, which is what I appreciate. I'd rather watch somebody just having a good time than trying to put together their special content. Not that your content isn't special, James. But you obviously have a great time. I like watching you shoot cards and all the different stuff that you do. So it's super cool. Yep. But and we'll get a little bit more to that maybe at the end. But for now, we're here to hear your stories, man. So why don't you set the stage for the first story? I know you said you got a good mule deer story for us.
Yeah, I got a good one. So, as a lot of people know, mule deer hunting is my favorite spot and stalk, especially in like the desert terrain. And on this shirt, I'm gonna tell a story of this buck right here on one of our shirts. These are all sold out, can't get them, but that's the Houdini buck right there. It's a super non-typical crazy buck. And how the story, I'm gonna start from the beginning. There's this one glassing spot I love to glass from, and some years is better than others. This one year in particular, it was good. So would hike up there in the dark in the mornings. I have these 25 power binoculars that are like this big, and then I got 7 powers, which most of the time I'm on the tripod with the 7s, unless I'm looking really far or need to see what something is. I'll pull out those 25s. So this morning I'm glassing, and it's kind of this amphitheater. There's like mountains like this, but then there's like this flat section down in the bottom. This is a January hunt, so these bucks are in the rut for
sure. You hunting in California, or where are you hunting?
This is in Arizona.
Okay.
This is in Arizona. So these bucks are in the rut, and in the morning I'm glassing, and every day I would see there's certain bucks you see every day, and I really hadn't dug out like a real like whopper yet. And I was looking, and I've always really had a thing for like weird, non-typical bucks as well. And if you look at a lot of my bucks, a lot of them are like weird. So this day I'm glassing, and there's like some thick bushes, and I could see through the bushes, and there was like some does milling around, and I see this like buck move. I could tell it was like super tall antlers and like tons of mass, but I was like, something seemed real weird with that buck. Like, I couldn't quite put my finger on it. So he's kind of behind bushes and finally walks out, and I can see he's like I said, really big old buck, probably like 7 or 8 or something. He's got like baseball can mask, but then I'm like, it's a 5 by on the one side, typical, but I'm like, the other side, something is going on. I couldn't quite figure it out. I was like, the only way I can find out what's going on exactly is to try to shoot this buck. It was like the coolest buck I've ever seen,
only
right?
Solution, right?
Yeah, and he a giant buck. I'm like, without a question, this is a shooter buck. I'm very picky with when I choose my stalks, when I choose to go, because I think mule deer hunt spot and stalk in that type of terrain is like very, very difficult. I think it's like one of the toughest ways to hunt. So if the elements aren't right, it's not going to work. Like, so I need to pick the right time to go. And on that day, I can't remember if I tried to stalk the buck or not. I want to say maybe I had like one route that might work. I knew it wasn't great, but it was like he down in the flats with like 10 does, and up here there's a huge mountain to his left with like cliffs running up. And basically where he was, there was no way to approach him with a good wind and any cover unless I could scale the cliffs and kind of get up and around them and then get like 180, come around them from the other side. I didn't think this would work, but I was like, you know what? I can climb those cliffs and at least get up there and not spook this group. And then from there, I can see if it's worth trying or if I should just find them another day and try it again. So I scaled this cliff. And I mean, when I say a cliff, I'm climbing like 20-foot vertical walls, like straight up and down rock climbing. And it's starting to like sleet a little bit.
Oh, perfect.
So it's slippery. And I get up there, get in like a cliff and a rock, and I could see him down there. And I'm like, yeah, I don't really have much of a play here. But I'm not hurting anything. I was like maybe 175 yards. So I said, I'll just got to watch these guys for a while and see what happens. So they're in this little flat spot, and then there's like this ravine ditch. It comes up and over away from me. And I'm like, okay, if they drop into that ditch and get up over that hill, then I can drop down and I should have a pretty good setup. So they eventually mill into this little bottom ravine. I creep down this steep cliff around them, and then I get down there. Now I'm like in the flats, and I can see I'm ground level, but they're in a big ditch, big canyon. And so I post up and see them come out of the canyon, and then they crest the little hill. And I go, okay, this is perfect, because now they're on the backside of a hill. There's decent wind. I mean, good wind, and it's blowing pretty good. So I know I can boogie over there and get to the top of that rise, and I should be within shooting range is what I'm thinking. So I bomb down there, go through the ditch, knock the arrow, get to the top. They're all gone. I don't see any of them. And I'm like, what in the heck happened here? Because I knew I didn't spook them. So I call my dad who's glassing. I'm like, dude, what happened with these deer? He goes, oh, well, the buck, all of a sudden, another smaller buck came in, and he just blitzed and ran them out of the country like 2 miles. And then all the does left too. So my timing was just really bad this day. I finally get it to work after like hours. And then the rut, sometimes the rut helps you and other times it doesn't. This was one of those cases, right? So
that's funny, man.
I was like, all right, I still want this, but I still got to get this buck. It's like the only thing I'm thinking about
Did you get
is
eyes on
finding.
him a little bit better while you were stalking in and figure out what was
No,
on the
not
backside, or no?
really, not
Okay.
really. Yeah, I could just tell something was real weird with one of the antlers, but like I couldn't exactly tell what it was. So I'm like, all right, I got to go find this buck again, and so I would glass from the same spot. It was to the point where I was kind of seeing him like I was seeing him like almost every day. It was just a matter of if he was in a good spot. So it's one day, see him again. He finally beds. This day, it's much different weather. It's like real sunny and hot. So they're not moving they're for a while. So I'm like, all right, this should pan out. I think I got this one. So I start stalking it. It's very open terrain, by the way, where I'm hunting. It's just like the only bushes are like this tall. So you're fully visible. So you really got to rely on having a good route, of course, good wind with the muleys and being silent. So it's like it's tough. And so I'm stalking in, and I'm kind of going, it's real gradual, mostly flat, kind of like gravelly ground, but it's pretty quiet. I got my
Okay.
sneaking shoes on and no pack, just my bow. So I don't have anything on me to make noise. And I mean, when I creep slow, people who've stalked with me know I barely move. Like I cover extremely little ground, like 100 yards in 45 minutes,
Gotcha.
barely
Oof,
move.
that is slow.
So I'm like getting there and I'm like, okay, I think I'm about in the area these deer are bedded, but it's real tough in the desert. Like everything kind of looks similar and you can't see them. Even though it's open, if they're bedded, you got to like, that's why I'm so slow. I'm like scanning like an x ray machine because they're so hard to see when they're bedded on the ground, like behind a cactus or whatever. So I'm like, I really don't want to mess up and pass the deer. This is my biggest fear is to pass the deer and then blow it because the wind would be poor.
Yeah.
So I'm like creeping along, looking both sides, like trying to find them, and then I look to my right and I hear something behind me. So I turn and look, and sure as shit, I had passed up like four does that were bedded like 15 yards, but you just can't see them, right?
Yeah.
So they get up, and I'm like, dang it, now the wind's bad. And I'm like, this is like when you're in panic mode a little bit. I'm like, I have to find the buck. So I'm scanning so hard, and the does were to my, like behind me, off, like I'm kind of on this little like peninsula ridge, and they're like this side of it. And I look over, there he is. I see the buck bedded. I don't know how I didn't see him. He's like 55 yards or something. And he drops his head. I knew he was going to get up. Obviously, his other deer did. So I see his head drop. So I raise up, draw, because that's always when deer stand up. Good pro tip, and drop their head, they're going to get up. So I drew, anchored the pin. I mean, it's pretty easy shots, like 55 yards in the open, no wind, not much wind. I let the shot go, and I hear clink, 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 clink. And I was like, did I just miss? I was like, there's no way I
Yeah.
missed. I mean, it just didn't make sense to me. So I watched this buck run away, and he just goes and goes and goes. And I'm like, I don't see any blood on him. He looks fine. Like, how did I miss? So I go look for my arrow, and honestly, I don't even remember if I found it or not. I probably did, but I don't remember. Uh, and I'm like, man, that really sucks. Of course, no blood. Sounded like a clean miss. I think I did find my arrow. There's nothing on it. And then it's like, well, that really sucks. I worked really
Yeah.
hard to get in that position, and I didn't, for whatever reason, I didn't make it happen.
Yeah.
And
So hindsight, you haven't gone back and been like figured it out. You're just sort of still in a little bit of mystery.
yeah, I've had a couple shots like that hunting where it's like I know I made a good shot, and for whatever reason, it
All right.
it didn't pan out. It happens in archery, it just
Yep.
does. But
Did Houdini's a good name for this guy. It sounds like. All right,
Right.
sorry.
So here's what's crazy. I don't remember if it was the same day or maybe the next day, but we get back up on our glassing spot. And no, that's not what happened. What happened was, okay, so we head back, and I think it was like the next day, we're in our Polaris Ranger on this road, and we bump into a rancher that leases some of this land for his cattle. Tons of public land out here. It's huge. This guy rolls up to us and he goes, "Hey, he goes, you guys been seeing any deer?" We go, "Yeah, we've been seeing some." And but my kids like they love to hunt Coues deer. I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, we're mostly hunting this mule deer country down lower." But he goes, "I saw the craziest thing this morning." He goes, "I saw this real big buck, typical five on one side, and a real weird, I couldn't tell, different antler on the left." I was like, "Okay, I know what Bucky's talking about." He goes, "I saw him this morning. It was weird. It looked like someone tied a red ribbon from the top of his back, like on his shoulders, to under his chest. It looked like he had a red ribbon tied around him." And I go, "Okay." I hit him right through the top of the back. I must have just barely cut, like the rage must have just barely skimmed and gave him a good cut, and he's bleeding down the sides. He's going to be fine. This is
Yeah.
not a lethal shot. But I'm like, okay, now I even more so gotta finish this. I
Yeah.
gotta finish this story. But of course, your first chance is theoretically the best. They're going to be the least educated. Now, this buck not only been stalked, he been clipped. So I'm like, man. And this was like a Thursday or Friday, and no one hunts like out here. No, nobody hunts this area now, except one guy, and he only hunts the weekends. He'll come for the weekends and he'll hunt, but he's not always there. And he glasses from the same spot we do, right? When he shows up, which isn't super often. But rolls around, his RV rolls in, and I'm like, dang it, he's gonna be on our glassing spot, and like I'm not gonna go sit up there. He only has a couple days. I'm like
Let him do
not
it.
gonna mess with it. But I'm like, he's gonna see that buck, and I go, okay, look, not trying to be a dick, but like most hunters, they'll see the bucks, but like the odds of actually getting in there and like sinking an arrow in one of these bucks like is quite low. So I'm like, it should be all right. So I'm like, my plan is let's let this guy hunt this spot. Let's go hunt a different spot for javelina or another deer or whatever for my dad or whatever. And then after that, on Monday, we'll come back and I'm going to shoot that buck again. The weekend goes by. Monday rolls around. We get up there, and I'm just like, I mean, glassing so hard, laser focused, just looking at everything and just cannot dig this buck up. Can't find him. And I'm like starting to get a little concerned. And then, I mean, it's getting late to the point where, a lot of deer will start bedding. You'll see less. I'm like, come on, please dig them. And I glass over to my right, and there's this nice cut. And all of a sudden, I just like catch a glimpse of like this body walking into this ditch. And I go, that was him. I know it was him. But I'm like, okay, we're in the game now. We're in the game. He's not too far. He's in a decent, approachable spot. And he comes out, and I think he ended up linking up with like, I don't know, 10 does or something. I always prefer it's less, but he had a lot this day. And I'm looking at it, and again, the only way I can get to him, it's like not a perfect scenario, is to go way up this big mountain, go through this saddle, and then like get on top of this like 40-foot cliff and try to like, come up with a new plan. But I'd be in like have good wind, and have great vantage point. So work my way over there, get on top of the cliff, and as soon as I get up there, I peek over, and like the deer they're like down below me, but it's pretty far and it was windy. So I couldn't, of course, get a shot. and he's with all these does. And I'm like, man, the only way to stalk in on him would be to drop off the cliff and then like stalk around the base of the cliff, but it's super rocky and steep. So it's going to be really hard to be quiet and not roll a rock or and it's going to be really difficult. So I kind of watch, and all of a sudden here comes another buck coming in, and he does not like that. So he just darts away like a half mile. He just chases this buck out of here. And I'm watching from on top of this cliff, like, again, this happening again. So he darts off, and I see him shoo this buck off, and then he turns around and starts coming back. But the good news is, I was like, it would be nice if I could stalk him just by himself, obviously. As he's coming back, the does, I don't know if the wind eddied a little and maybe they caught my wind for a second. I'm not sure, but they move off out into the flats. And he comes back to where they were by himself now. And I'm like, okay, well, I got to wait for him to bed up. And unfortunately, I know how it's going to go. He's going to follow those does out into the flats. But I think, honestly, because I had clipped him with a 2-inch rage, I think he was a little tired.
Yeah.
And like I said, he's an old deer too. So I think he was beat, And I could see him walking. And I was like, dude, that buck looks tired, like he gonna bed up for sure. So he's walking down below me like 200 yards, and I'm like, please bed down. Don't go to the does. Please bed down. And dude, he walks, and there's this little tiny knob on the side of this hill, and there's like a nice gravel spot. And I see him walk over there, do a spin, lay down, right? And thankfully, he bedded looking straight away from where I'm going to be coming from. And the wind is not going to be straight in my face, but I'll have a good, like, if he's over here, the wind will be cutting like this way. So I should be okay. I'm like, dude, this couldn't be any better. Now I can flank this hill. It's still going to be really difficult not to roll a rock or crack too many twigs. So it's going to be hard. I got to take a lot of time to make sure I'm quiet, but I can see his head. I can see his antlers. So if he gets alert and does like this, I can just stop, and he's looking away from me. I'm like, it really can't get any better. Like, this is perfect. So I come down off the cliff, start skirting the side, and I was like, I thought when I came around the hill and saw him, like, because I knew I would be able to see him again, he would be further. I come around, and I'm like, oh, geez, I was like 150. And I have to take my pack off, put my sneaking shoes on. And it is so dry. I mean, I'm going across these rocks on the steep country, and it sounds like there's this one plant with like these little, almost like bells on them. So every time you hit one, it's like making all these like, and I'm trying my best, and I'm being pretty quiet. A plane would fly over, and I would like get a few more steps. You let that noise cover mine, and I'm like, okay, going crazy slow. And I would just range him. Okay, now I'm at 80. So if he stands up, he at 80. Get more yards. Okay, now he's at 60. Now he's at 55. Now he at 45. And now he at 40, 30. So now I'm standing at 30 yards. I just see this big ass buck broadside looking away from me. He's so big that I could easily shoot him real good bedded. But the problem is there's a big boulder right in front of his vitals, right?
Perfect.
Of course. So I'm like standing here at 30 yards, and I'm like, all right, I'm right here. Don't blow it. Can't blow it. And I'm like, okay. I'm just analyzing. I'm looking at him. He's real calm. And I'm like, okay, if I can get 2 steps to the right, I think I can shoot him like last rib and quarter it in. And I don't even have to run the risk of him getting up and darting. Like if he sees me or hears me draw or the wind, like I can just end it right now. So I like go to take a step, go to take another step. And I'm like right about to get where I need. And I see his head go drop. So I just go, and he stands up. Boom, let the arrow fly 30 yards broadside. I watch this arrow just, hit him right where I want,
Yeah.
perfect, great shot. So he bombs off the hill, and I always have a policy that if the animal's still up and I have a chance to shoot him again, try to shoot another arrow. So he runs down the
Makes
hill. I
sense.
didn't have time to range, but he went broadside. And I shot, and I think like I missed yardage it by like 5-10 yards. I think I hit over him or something. So he never even ran. He's like walking down this thing, and I start following him, and I knew the shot was like money. I watched it, and he just like I never could get closer than like 150 yards. So him and I are just walking 150 yards apart down this hill. And I'm like, go down. Why are you not going down? He's just like a bulldozer just walking down this hill. And I'm like, dude, come on, please go down. Please go down. And I'm like starting to wonder, like, is something, did I not see my shot right? Like it looked good. And then I watch him like go into this little opening and I see him start to like do one of these and he puts his legs out and dude, this the will to live for animals is always very impressive, dude. This dude did not want to go out, but then yeah, eventually he tips over and I walked up to him. Yeah, basically it's this big typical 5 by with a brow tine. It's like I think I was a 89-inch antler when I measured it or something.
Wow.
Yeah, and then the other side is like a big matched like mass and it's like a fork with just like a club coming off the front, like a weird like clubbed antler, like a baby's arm. It's so funky, dude. I was like, man, this has
Come
got to
pick
be
this
like
art.
my favorite. It to this day, that's my like favorite animal that I've got. Just because I love mule deer and the hunt, and shooting them twice, and the whole deal was pretty crazy. So, but yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know if we'll be able to see, but like that's the buck right there.
that's awesome. Send me that later, and I'll put that on the Instagram
Yeah,
post when
you
I.
can kind of see that club is
That's
crazy.
cool, man. That's cool. It
Yeah.
reminds me of so this elk season, opening day, we're out. We're calling all day. Nothing's talking back to us. We're just trying to get something of a sound off. It's the very end of the day, and I'm with Patrick Luttrell. He's actually I think 2023 World Elk Calling Champ for this year.
Oh
For,
wow.
or for the men's division, not the pro division, but the men's division. And he rips a bugle, and we hear a bugle. So we run off into this field, and it's this giant open draw. And there's a bull on the backside of it, 600 yards away. And he's just looking at us, and we're concealed in the trees. He can't see us, but he's just ripping bugles. He's got a spike with him, and he just looks weird. He just looks super weird. We're like, there's one side is super tall. The other side, it looked like about half as tall, and we're like, what's going on there? And so we're all like, well, maybe he broke it off. Who knows? We had a camera guy with us, so the camera guy's like zooming in on him, and we set up, and he's not coming 600 yards across an open field, so we're trying in vain. But either way, he does come a little bit closer, and I'm sitting there with my binos because I'm the closest to him, and I realize that's not a broken off like antler. It's like a moose paddle. So he had like a
What?
regular typical elk antler on one side, and his other one it was wide. It was probably at one point like 12 inches wide, just like
Wow.
and it was I don't know, it was like 2 feet shorter than the other one. But just because of the mass, my Pat was saying, he's like, man, that's a 380-inch plus bull, like just because of the mass on that side. Like I said, it looked super weird. We couldn't quite figure it out. Fortunately, we were able to like pull some still frames from the video from the camera guy and like zoom in really close. And he was like, yeah, I'm going to name him. I was like, we got to name him King something with that kind of paddle. He's like, some king. And he's like, no, we got to name him Big Balls. I was like, all right, we'll name him King Big Balls. Never laid eyes on him again. But we went back to that field. I ended up killing a bull this year, one draw down from there. But it was super weird. I know that feeling of seeing an animal, and you're like, what's going on with those antlers? It just didn't make any sense. And at first, we almost like wrote him off as like, oh, he's lost half of his right antler. There's no reason for let's leave that guy alone. But he was a monster. Just a
That
beast.
sounds like a bitchin' bull. Yeah. I
Yeah.
love stuff like that. Yeah. And it's crazy too, like especially for like maybe not so much for elk because they travel more, but like for mule deer in some of these areas we hunt, it's crazy. Like that genetic strain from that buck I've shot, I've seen 4 or 5 that are very evidently like descendants of that buck. Like I saw one literally at the exact same thing, like a typical side, the weird club, like real narrow and tall. And then I shot another buck the next year, or maybe 2 years later. That for sure, you put their euros next to each other. That one's not as weird, but he's like a I don't know, like a 5x6 or something, like also weird kickers and stuff, real narrow. And you're like, 100% it's his like son or brother. So it's
Yeah.
funny to watch the genetics like carry through.
Yeah, actually, it's funny you say that. The Pat, he hunts that unit all the time with that bull with a paddle, and he said that his friend, like 2 or 3 years earlier, shot one with a similar paddle, not as big, but like something super similar. And they're like, wonder if he's got to be related. So
Yeah, for sure.
who knows? There's sometimes there's resident elk herds, sometimes they have hundreds
Yeah.
of miles in their range, but it's the genetics is pretty cool. I was curious if it was an injury or something because I've never seen an elk paddle, right? It's usually a drop tine or something weird, but
Yeah.
it was basically a paddle on one side.
Yeah, that is crazy. Yeah, I saw an elk with a drop tine this year when we were out hunting as well. It was like kind of a raghorn,
Yeah,
but yeah, on the right antler, he had like a drop tine, like I don't know, probably like that big.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it
That's
was
super
pretty
cool.
impressive. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, well, that's a cool story, man. And yeah, Houdini's a good name. Good name for
Yeah.
him. The bull that I shot, we're naming him Plato, which isn't nearly as cool as Houdini, but it has nothing to do with the bull itself. It has more to do with the story of us getting in there. But
Yeah.
I'm saving that for another podcast once those boys get out of the woods. In fact, one of the guys just put down a cow moose today. I think maybe it was yesterday, but as soon as he's out of the woods with his moose, we're gonna record that story. It's a pretty fun one.
Cool.
But yeah, you remind me of one other story. You're talking about like sneaking up on an animal and they just
Mhm.
completely disappear. Yours got drove out, but I was antelope hunting one time, and we started to realize that you can't stop the truck when you see antelope. You got to just keep driving. As soon as you stop, they're gone. But if you keep driving, we drove until we were able to park the truck, got up behind this hill, and we've got this herd of 15 or so antelope, and we know the topography well enough that I'm like, hey, if you stay here and keep eyes on them, I could probably get back in the truck because it's again behind this larger mound. Otherwise, just everything's flat, 1 inch bushes, just like you were saying. I was like, if I can get in the truck, I'll drive around, and there's a road right behind them, and I can come up from the other way, and the wind would be perfect. And so I do exactly that, and I put a pin where I think they're going to be, and I walk in, and it gets to the point where I'm like, they should be standing right here. Like I don't get it, and I'm like standing up, looking around, trying to find these antelope. And I'm like, screw this, and I just basically get out of there, jump back in, go back to the same spot. And I'm like, well, what the hell? They were in the exact same spot when I left them. It's just apparently my pin was terrible. So I learned my lesson there. It's like the Onyx, they have that range finder thing
Yeah.
on the Onyx. I've now at least twice learned that I need to use that. I need to range the animal and then put a pin in the direction that amount because my pins are always off. But
Yeah.
I was probably 30 yards from those antelope, and neither one of us had any idea. My buddy's like, I watched you the whole time. I don't know why you didn't kill those antelope.
Yeah.
So, yeah, sometimes animals just disappear as you start to move around, right?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Especially hunting that like anywhere with little divots or cuts or desert's key for that. Like I've hunted sand dunes before. Those are like the toughest. Like
I
stuff can
bet.
disappear so fast because the dunes are in the, they're like in the ground and then they're one will be connected to like 10 others. So you'll see the deer go in the dune and you'll go over there and he's just completely gone. And you'll walk all the dunes and then they're somehow they escape through and yeah, it's crazy.
Yep, yep. Well, James, that was fun, man. I don't know. I know you came with that one especially prepared. You got any other ones that kind of popped up while you were telling that story that you want to tell?
Hmm. Let's see here. Yeah, all right. I'll toss in a bonus little javelina story. I bet you don't
There
get
we go.
many javelina stories,
Yeah, I
so
think this will be the first Avelina story, so
let's
let's go.
go. All right. So I
Plenty of
love,
hogs, but no javelina.
yeah, so I love hunting javelina. It's like I've done it ever since I was a kid. Love hunting javelina, and it's pretty rare to see them by themselves, right? I've shot like I don't know 20 javelina with a bow probably, and two of them have been by themselves. And usually that's because they're big, mature boars that are past their prime, and the group will kind of kick them out, and then they're like just nomads on their own. Very rare to see. Usually they're with like 8 to 20
Yeah.
javelina. So this one time I'm hunting, and some years I'll dig out like tons of javelina in the mountains. I'll glass them up, and you have a lot of opportunity. Other years, it's like you just can't dig them out. it's like you're working much harder. And this one year it snowed, and I was like, it would be so bitching to get a javelina in the snow. Like I would love it, like in these mountains. So I'm like, I gotta find one today, in the snow. So I'm like looking so hard, and I'm just looking all over the place. Cannot find a javelina to save my life. And I have a deer tag too, but like this day, I'm like, I gotta find a javelina. So I'm like hitting all these glassing knobs and glassing for like an hour, and then moving. I knew they'd be moving all day because it was cold out. And unfortunately, the snow is like melting and melting and melting. And eventually, there's like not really snow. I get to this one vantage point, and I'm glassing, and all of a sudden, dude, I see right on the ridge, like 300 yards in front of me, boom, a javelina's like feeding, facing me, like rooting. I can only see the one, but I'm like, I know how this goes. Usually you can see one, you get over there, it's like 15. It's generally how it goes.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, this is perfect. I'm going to go get a javelina. So unfortunately, there's no snow anymore. But so I get down there. I don't even remember. I put my sneaking shoes on. I always do.
Real quick, sneaking shoes. Like, are we talking like moccasins or what do you use? Just
Same idea, but I wear water shoes like that you get at like, Walmart or whatever for walking in the pool or the beach. They're amazing. I've used a lot of different stuff over the years. Those are not only, I think, the best that I've found, but they're also like $10.
okay.
So, and they're lights. They pack in your pack easy. They're real soft, but they have grip and protect your feet a little from cactus. Cactus will still go through, but it's better than just like a sock by far.
Got it.
So anyway, I put those on, drop the pack, and I'm creeping in. Wind's real good, and I'm like stalking in, and I see something to my left. So I'm, of course, thinking it's going to be some javelina milling around. I look to my left, and there's three quadamandes like 40 yards away. I don't know if you know what this is. Do you know what this is?
No, I don't.
So basically, it's a South American animal. It's like in the raccoon family, but it kind of looks, they're pretty rare to
Like a
see.
monkey,
But
right? Like
it
I
looked
think I
like a
do know what that
monkey.
is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
pretty
raccoon
much.
monkey.
They look like monkeys, and they have these huge tails. So
Rolling packs, right?
I had glassed them up before, like far away one time, but this time I'm on the ground like 40 yards from these things. I'm like, holy smokes! It was cool to see them,
Yeah.
but I'm on a stalk, so I'm like, I don't really stand there and just like watch up my like, okay, let me go get this javelina. So I start going after this javelina, and I like couldn't. I think I like lost him for a little bit, and I was like, maybe I glassed up a Quadamante. I thought it was a javelina, and I was like, no, I know I saw a javelina like right in here. So I'm like stalking down this hill. The wind's pretty good. Finally, I see him, but again, I only see the one. But every time I stalk javelina, I personally like to always have my head doing this because there could easily be like four right here in this bush. I'm stalking in, and he's just in this cactus, just tearing it apart, like facing straight away from me, and the wind's great. So I'm stalking. I'm at like 30 yards, 20 yards, 15, 10. Finally, I'm at 9 yards, and he's feeding, and I'm like, dude, I really would like to. This is already a record for me. Is if I get him at 9 yards, this is like this. I've shot him closer than that, but not spot and stalk like that. So I'm like, it would be really cool to get closer. But the problem was I had this big bush in front of me, and there's that video is actually on the channel, but it's really old. But I think I stood there, the arrow knocked, with him feeding at 9 yards, facing away from me. I think for like 8 minutes or something.
Oh, really?
Finally, he turns just a little bit, and I thump him, obviously, like really good shot, and he runs around the tree, and I hear him go down, and I'm like waiting for the other ones to bust out of there, and there just was no other one. So I'm like, huh. That's the first time I had got one like that. So I walk over to where he went down, and dude, this thing was like a giant javelina. Like I got some big ones, but this one was like I mean, it was like a wild boar. He was so big, and I
Yeah.
have a picture where I'm holding him like in front of my face, like this almost, and he's like touching the ground.
Oh wow, that
That's
is a
how
big
long.
javelina.
That's how long he. And he's so thick, and I'm like, usually I have so many javelina skulls. Usually I don't like keep the heads, but I was like, I gotta boil this one to see like if it's bigger or like whatever. Its teeth are all busted off. It's missing like half its teeth. And sure enough, dude, I boil that skull and set it next to like another one of my javelina skull. It's like twice as wide almost, and like
That's so crazy.
it's huge. It's taller, wider, and I'm like, this thing must have been like I don't know how old they get, but he had to have been ancient because he's like missing molars and missing
Man,
front teeth. His tusks are half gone. It was
Here-
crazy.
here's a couple
And from what I
questions.
heard, yeah,
A quick question. I know
yeah,
that like hogs, right? You
yeah.
occasionally hear of hogzilla, like 1,200 pound
Mhm.
giant hogs. I know javelinas are not hogs.
No.
They're a different species, but they do look similar. Do
Mhm.
they? Can they? Like, what's the biggest one you've ever heard of?
Probably that one. I've never heard of someone getting one bigger than that. And I mean, maybe on some of these farms, people shoot them. Like you might get a real fat one, but this was like a mountain one. And I
Yeah.
would guess he was probably, I would say your average mature javelina is like 40 to 50 pounds,
Okay.
probably. This one, I wouldn't be surprised if he was like 60 to 70. He was
Yeah. So that's
huge.
substantially bigger. An extra
Yeah, yeah.
50%.
But it was a unicorn. Like I said, I've shot so many. I've never seen one like that. Like normally you boil the skull and they all look roughly the same, other than like the tusks might be a little
Okay.
different. This one's skull is literally like 30% bigger than all the other ones.
That's crazy, man. And
Yeah.
another question about javelina. I've never hunted them. I want to, but
Yeah.
do you eat that, or is it more of
Yeah.
like just a game animal? You
Oh,
do?
yeah.
Okay.
No, I eat them. Yeah. So actually, I enjoy the meat a lot from javelina. Um, And the way I like to do it is when we get one, we just stew chunk the whole animal. So back straps, everything's just stew chunks, and then we got a stew recipe that's really really good. Like I think it's a good protein, like good texture, and the flavors is fine, especially in a stew, like where there's a bunch of
Yeah.
other stuff. And I actually look forward to that like more than a lot of my other animals eating
That's
heavily.
cool. What
Yeah.
would you compare it to? Like, I want to say to pork. Is it basically just
No, I don't know. It's kind of you can't really compare it to much, I don't think. It's like kind of like a weird color to the meat. It's almost like more of a like a lighter color
huh?
meat, but it's kind of stringy. Their diet is like eating cactus. So cactus
Yeah.
and bugs. So it's okay. I mean, but I think they're good, and yeah, they're an interesting animal to hunt. They definitely teach people how to glass, like how to use binoculars. Because a lot of people think they glass, but really all they do is walk up a mountain, go like this for 3 minutes, and then move. Like when we're glassing in this country, it's like now we're sitting in like the same vantage point for like 4 hours and looking at everything over and over and over again. For the deer, that's how you find the hammers, or for javelina. And I think a lot of people could benefit from going javelina hunting because they're going to be like, oh, it's going to be easy to find one. And then day 7, you'll go, I still haven't seen one because you got to learn how to glass. And a lot of people, I
Yeah.
think, especially from the Eastern guys, are like even Western guys. A lot of people don't know how to glass like
Yeah.
proficiently.
I
And
struggle with it, man. I'll
I
be
think
honest. I'm not very
javelina's
good at
like
it.
javelina in the mountains, like not on farms, like obviously that's different. But if you're hunting them in the mountains and like have to find them out of washes and stuff, that'll teach you how to glass without
Gotcha.
question.
Yeah, I solved my inability to glass by my hunting buddy. He is a phenomenal glasser. The dude can spot anything,
Yep.
anywhere. We're driving down the road. He's like, boop, 6 elk over there. Like, it's just, he's got a natural ability. While me, on the other hand, it is probably, I know, my weakest thing as far as hunting. I struggle with doing it, with the patience of doing it. It's a skill for sure.
It 100% takes practice and like getting better at it. A lot of my friends when they would come hunt and they were newer hunters at the time, they would be like, "How come you glass up everything and like we never see anything?" And I go, "Well, there's a couple of things. Number one, I'm not on my phone.
Yeah.
Like I'm actually looking the whole time for hours. And number two, like I've done this for I don't even know how many hours of my life, like a tremendous amount of time. So you just started. You can't expect to like put up the same results as someone who's like spent countless hours doing this. And then it's fun because by year 5 or 6, they're seeing a lot more. They still might not
Yeah.
be seeing like the same amount, but it's come up a lot. And I think that goes to show that the more time you spend behind the glass and less time on your phone and like really focused on looking, the better you get at knowing what colors to look for, shapes, sizes, movements, like things like that. You just kind of learn how to be better at it. And your eyes
Yeah.
too, I think, kind of like adjust to seeing things too.
Yep. Yep.
You know.
I will say that my hunting buddy, the one thing he is great at spotting things, he is absolutely garbage at explaining where he's looking. I'm like, what are you
That's
looking at? And
probably me.
he's like, there's trees, and I'm like, there are 10 million trees over there. Like, you're not helping me out. So we're
Dude,
still working on the full picture here, but we're
I
piecing
think
it
I
together.
relate. I think I relate to that a little bit. That's funny.
Yeah, cool,
That's
James.
cool.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate you. I'm not going to turn you away if you want to tell any more stories. Otherwise, we can wrap up. I appreciate your time either way, my guy.
Dude, I'll tell you what, let's do another one sometime and save them. But I think we're about 40 minutes here. So
Something
pretty
like that. Yeah.
solid. And again, I do appreciate you having me on. It's fun. And I got a lot more stories, so we could hit some more sometime. But
Sounds good, man.
I
Sounds
like
good. Well,
I
let's do
like your
this.
elk story. I want to see, maybe you can send me a picture of that paddle bowl.
Oh, well, so yeah, there are good pictures somewhere. The only ones I have were me taking a photo of the computer screen, so they're
Uh,
garbage. But I'll send you what I have, and then
all right,
when I do actually get a better picture of it,
cool.
because the guys that have that information, they went from our hunt in Colorado to Idaho for 20 days, back here to moose hunt. So I'm waiting to see some of the footage that they got, but I'll definitely send it your way. But yeah, why don't we tell the people where they can find you? Your website, Instagram,
Yeah,
whatever you
yeah,
want
yeah.
to share.
Yeah, so our main thing is YouTube. Just Bow Disciples is the channel. We do a lot of like archery stuff, a lot of hunts. So like Michael was saying, we do some fun stuff that's way different. We do some like storytelling, whatever. There's all sorts of content. And then it's Bow Disciples on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook as well, and then bowdisciples.com. That's it. So we're kind of everywhere.
Perfect, man. Perfect. And I'll put links to all that in the show notes,
Yeah.
like we're supposed to do. And man, I appreciate you. Thank you again. It was a lot of fun hearing your stories.
Dude, appreciate you, and we'll do it again, brother.
Sounds good. All right, guys. That's it. Another couple stories in the books. Again, I want to thank James, of course, for coming on the podcast. He didn't hesitate to jump to my call and tell us some of his favorite stories. I thought of some off the cuff. It was a lot of fun, and it was great to meet him. Hopefully, I get to redeem myself and buy the guy a beer and meet him in person someday here in the near future. Beyond that, guys, please check out Bow Disciples. Again, links to everything you need are in the show notes. While you're there, go ahead and follow us on Instagram. And give us a review on whatever you're listening to right now, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Give us a review, hopefully 5 stars, and hopefully we have more people finding us here in the future to reach out and tell us their crazy stories. That's it, guys. Thank you again for tuning in. I appreciate all of you. Hope you guys enjoyed. Now get out there and make some stories of your own. Thank you.